It was a Tuesday in the summer of 1952, and the air in that small town carried the smell of red earth and ripe guava. The kind of afternoon that moves slowly, as if time itself is afraid of disturbing something fragile. He was walking his bicycle down the main street, pushing it by the handlebars the way a man walks beside someone he no longer wants to hold hands with. His girlfriend was beside him, talking about something he had already stopped listening to. She was a good girl. Everyone in town said so. She came from a decent family. She knew how to sew. She kept her hair neat under a ribbon, and she never raised her voice in public. She was, by every standard the town had invented, the right choice. He was not thinking about the right choice. He was thinking about nothing, actually. He was just walking, the way young men walk when they are somewhere between who they were yesterday and who they are about to become. The bicycle wheels turned slowly against the uneven ground. The cobblestones made a low, irregular sound beneath the rubber, and somewhere above the rooftops, a bird was singing something without a name. That was when he saw her. She was on the other side of the street, not doing anything remarkable. She was simply crossing, just walking from one side to the other the way people do 1,000 times in a lifetime without anyone noticing. But something about the way she moved, something about the angle of her chin, or the way the afternoon light caught the edge of her dress as it shifted with each step. Something made time do something strange. It did not stop, exactly. It just became very, very still. He did not say a word. His girlfriend was still talking. Her voice was somewhere behind him like a radio left on in another room. He kept pushing the bicycle forward, one hand on the handlebar, but his eyes had followed that girl across the street and stayed there long after she had disappeared between two houses. He did not understand what had happened. He was 23 years old, and he had never felt anything rearrange itself inside his chest like that. Not from one second to the next, not from the simple act of watching a stranger cross a dirt road in the heat of a Tuesday afternoon. But something had. He walked his girlfriend to her front door. He said goodbye the way you say goodbye when your mouth is still working, but your mind has already left the room. She smiled at him. She always smiled, and he turned around and walked back into the street. And the strange thing, the thing he would never quite be able to explain to himself, even years later, was that he did not feel guilty about what he was thinking. He felt something closer to clarity, the sharp, almost frightening clarity of someone who has just understood something they cannot unlearn. He found out her name 3 days later. It took him another week to speak to her, and when he finally did, standing near the well at the edge of the square with his hat in his hands and his voice doing something unreliable, she looked at him the way she would look at him for the next 30 years, steady, a little amused, like she had been expecting him and was mildly curious about how long it would take. The town talked, of course. Small towns in 1952 had very few entertainments, and a young man dropping a perfectly acceptable girlfriend to chase after a girl nobody knew particularly well was the kind of thing that kept conversations alive for months. His family was cautious. Her family was cautious in a different way. Everyone was watching to see how long it would last. They got married in the spring of 1954. The wedding was modest, flowers from the garden, a borrowed tablecloth, a priest who spoke faster than usual because he had 3 more ceremonies that afternoon. There was no honeymoon in the modern sense. There was a small house with thin walls and a wooden floor that creaked in a specific spot near the kitchen door. There was a mattress, a table, 2 chairs, and a window that faced east so the morning light came in early and filled the room with something that almost looked like gold. There was almost nothing else. In those first years, having visitors meant something complicated, because there was nowhere to sit, not really. 2 chairs were enough for the 2 of them, but when family came, when neighbors knocked on the door, when the world arrived unannounced the way it always does, there was nothing to offer them, not even a place to rest. He was a carpenter by trade. He had learned it from his father, who had learned it from his. It was not a glamorous profession in 1954. It was sawdust and splinters and the slow, patient work of shaping something solid out of something raw. He came home one evening with a piece of timber he had set aside from a job, a good piece, dense and smooth-grained, and he worked on it through the weekend in the narrow space behind the house. When he was finished, he carried it inside and placed it against the wall near the door. It was a bench, simple, without decoration, built with the kind of precision that comes not from showing off, but from respecting the material. It was the first real piece of furniture they owned that was not strictly necessary for survival. It was the thing they put in their home so that other people would have somewhere to sit, so that the door could be opened without shame. She ran her hand along the top of it and did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "We can receive people now," and he looked at the bench and then at her and understood that she was not just talking about the bench. The years move the way years move when life is genuinely difficult and genuinely full at the same time. They moved fast in memory and slow in the living of them. There were good seasons and seasons that were not good at all. There were arguments that lasted for days, the kind that do not explode but simmer, where two people move carefully around each other in a small house like ships navigating fog. There were nights when money was the enemy of sleep, when the numbers did not add up no matter how many times they were counted, when the question of whether things would be all right felt genuinely unanswerable. But there were also the other things, the things that do not make it into the official version of a difficult life. The Sunday mornings that belonged only to them, before the children were awake, when the house was quiet and the coffee was hot and there was nothing that needed to be said because everything had already been understood. The specific way she laughed at something he did not think was funny, which made him laugh anyway. The way he knew, without being told, when she needed silence and when she needed to be heard. The language that two people build between themselves over years, made not of words, but of gestures, silences, expressions, the angle of a shoulder, the particular way someone puts down a cup. The children came, 3 of them, each one arriving like a weather event, changing the atmosphere of the house permanently. The bench by the door that he had built in 1954 became the place where shoes were removed, where children sat to be scolded or comforted, where guests rested between the door and the living room. It weathered and darkened with the years and became, without anyone deciding it should be, the oldest thing in the house. The bicycle that had been a weight in his hands on that Tuesday afternoon in 1952 was eventually replaced by other bicycles, children's bicycles, leaning against the side of the house, wheels caked with mud, gears that never quite worked properly. And somewhere in the middle years of the 1960s and 1970s, the dirt roads of the town were paved over. The cobblestones disappeared under asphalt. The sounds changed. The smell of red earth after rain was replaced by something different, something harder and more permanent. He noticed it one morning, driving to a job site, the new smoothness of the road under the wheels, and he thought, without planning to think it, that this was what 30 years felt like from the inside. Not a transformation you experience all at once, but the slow covering of rough ground, the gradual replacement of uncertainty with something you could move across without watching every step. By the 1980s, the house was different. The walls were not thin anymore. There were more chairs than people who lived there, which was a kind of luxury that he never quite got used to. The kitchen had been expanded twice. The workshop out back had grown into something serious, with proper equipment and a small reputation in the region. His hands had changed too, thicker, more deliberate, marked by the accumulated evidence of 40 years of working with wood. Their children were grown. Each one had taken a different road out of the house, which is what children are supposed to do, though it does not make the leaving any quieter. One had gone north for work and built a life there. Another had stayed nearby and could be seen most Sundays. The third had studied, become something technical and precise, married someone equally precise. All 3 had become, in their different ways, people he did not always fully understand, but was profoundly proud of. And now there were the grandchildren. The first one had arrived the previous spring, a girl with her grandmother's eyes and a grip on your finger that felt like it meant something. He had held her in his arms the day she came home from the hospital and felt something happen in him that was not quite like anything else he had ever felt. Not the passion of 1952, not the love of the young years, not the deep, steady companionship of the middle years. Something else, something quieter and more final, like arriving at a place you have been walking toward without knowing it. She had watched him hold the baby and said nothing, but there was something in her face that was also a kind of arrival. 30 years. People say that phrase as if it explains something, as if 30 years of marriage is a destination you reach by following the correct path. But he knew, in the way you know things that cannot be argued for, that 30 years was not a destination. It was the accumulated weight of 10,000 ordinary days. It was the sum of every meal eaten together, every disagreement navigated, every piece of news received side by side. It was the specific texture of waking up next to the same person for 30 years and still being, on some mornings, genuinely glad they are there. He thought sometimes about that Tuesday in 1952, about the bicycle and the cobblestones and the girl crossing the street. He thought about the version of himself who had stood at his girlfriend's door and said goodbye without knowing he was saying goodbye to an entire future that had been planned for him. He thought about how young he had been, how completely certain, in the wordless way of that moment, that something had changed irreversibly. And it had, but not in the way he had imagined at 23. At 23, he had thought that the feeling of seeing her cross the street was the story, that the sharpness of that moment was the point. That love was the vertigo of the first encounter, the heart rearranging itself without permission. He understood now that the first moment was only the door. What lay on the other side of the door was something that could not be felt in a single afternoon. It could only be built, the way a carpenter builds something, carefully, over time, with attention to the grain of the material, with the understanding that the joints that hold something together are more important than the surface anyone can see. The bench by the door was still there. He had repaired it twice over the years, replacing a board that had cracked, resetting a joint that had loosened. It was not the same bench it had been in 1954, not exactly, but it was continuous with that bench. It carried the same intention, the same grain, the same reason for existing. He thought that marriages were something like that. Not the same from year to year, always being repaired, always requiring attention to the places where the strain is showing, but continuous, carrying the same intention across the decades. The original decision renewed so many times it had become something different from a decision. It had become a fact of the landscape, like the road, like the house, like the hands that knew how to fix what was broken without needing to be told where to begin. She came into the room where he was sitting. She was carrying 2 cups of coffee, which she placed on the table with the efficiency of someone who has performed this gesture so many times it has become effortless. She sat down across from him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The afternoon light was coming through the window. It caught the edge of her face the way light catches things that have been shaped by time into something refined and essential. She looked, in that moment, nothing like the girl he had seen crossing the street in 1952. She looked like someone else entirely, someone he had met gradually over 30 years, in 1,000 different lights. He found that he loved this woman more precisely than he had ever loved the girl at the beginning. Not more intensely, perhaps, but more accurately. The way you understand a piece of wood more after you have worked with it than before you touched it. Knowing its weight, its resistance, the places where it will hold, and the places where it must be handled gently. She looked at him over her coffee and said, "You are thinking again." He smiled. He said, "I was thinking about a bicycle." She raised an eyebrow the way she had been raising that eyebrow for 30 years and said, "You and your bicycles." And he laughed, and she laughed, and outside the window the afternoon continued doing what afternoons do, moving slowly, carrying the smell of something ripe, pretending that time is not passing while passing all the same. The grandchildren would be coming on the weekend. The house would fill again with noise and small shoes left in improbable places, and the specific chaos of people who have not yet learned to be careful. The bench by the door would receive them. The coffee would be made in larger quantities. The table that had once been enough for 2 would be surrounded again by all the lives that had grown from this one beginning. He looked at the window, at the road outside, smooth and gray and certain, so different from what it had been. He thought about the dirt, about the sound of cobblestones under a bicycle wheel, about a girl crossing a street on a Tuesday in 1952 who did not know she was being watched, who did not know that someone on the other side of the road was in the process of making the most important decision of his life, without quite deciding anything at all. Passion, he had learned, is the thing that makes you cross the street. But admiration, the quiet, daily, renewable admiration for who someone is when no one is performing anything, that is the thing that makes you walk 30 years in the same direction. And still want to see what is around the next corner.